So, what's the scenario with me and the government and their overreach helpers, organized crime hustlers, with the bureaucratic, administrative, regulatory overreach and bar hooch, plus con hustling church and women? Well, this all started with their marriage character, rape bait bride, husband, hitman, crime hustles at me when my mother died. And they decided to say some statement about marriage versus murder, where they started hitting me with boogeyman, Bloody Mary, murder business, best man bridesmaid stuff. And of course, we're in the, I live in the state of Kentucky, with the capital of Frankfurt, and I live in the biggest city in Kentucky, Louisville. So what do? They do kid entrapments, and they frame and lie. Okay, in Louisville, I think their theme is lie, lie, lie. So they know they can get you in trouble with children, and people will get real mad about it if they frame you and lie, and people will get mad at you about the lies and framing they told these people, and they'll attack you to protect children. So that goes into the flower maiden and flower girl and the ring bearer. So again, like double up on the rape bait and fucking lies. Okay. And then of course, they have the government police of overreach bitches and tyranny rape on it, based upon the flower girl and then the first lady. And then, of course, beds. Alright, with the 6-6. And then FL. And then the frame of the bed. And then lying. So framing and lying. Okay, so that's basically what they've been doing, the marriage character con. Of course, I'm not married. I've got my liberty in the USA, so I don't have to get married. I don't have to do this and that. But they want to, I don't know, I think they have a New York con of the Statue of Liberty at me. Like, I'm going to be dead over women here versus my liberty. And then they've got the Donald Trump, you're fired stuff, I think. But, and all the tyranny rape. But, the first time they hit me, they were doing a Neighbors Address Nation con. And then country cover up the tyranny overreach. So I moved into my house. It was my Uncle Dale's old house, who died and left it to my mother, his sister, in a will, because he died of Hep C in the 90s. And when I dropped out of college, they let me live in that house. They were renting it out, but they gave the people like a year's notice, and I just went and stayed in apartments. And then I moved in. And I moved in 2013. And I lived at 219 El Dorado. So that's 4 years from 2013 to 2017. And my next door neighbor was 217 because I was 219. So they did a police entrapment and got me locked up 100 days in 2017, and they did it in October for the O to be in the 2017. And what happened was they paid off my drug dealer to set up people at me. So they got agent provocators to do the entrapment, and it involved a red-headed woman, and they were all representing Donald Trump's name, because that was also the year Donald Trump turned president, was 2017. And her name was Tavia. She had to do with my bathroom colors in a Bloody Mary scene. And then pH alpha house paint. And my parents asked me, what would you like for the house paint colors? So I told them I want to do a rainbow theme within neutral colors with it. So they painted the outside green, they painted the rest of the colors on the inside, the other 6. Except for they were supposed to paint the bathroom violet, which I requested. But they painted it turquoise. Okay, it was like a jade turquoise. Now, no big deal. I mean, I wanted it violet, but what the heck. So anyway, that's where Tavia's name comes in. Turquoise violet. And I ended up getting in trouble with her on one of the streets called Bonnie. And that's going to represent bathroom. And then it involved a red Mustang of a man named Pat, painted turquoise, Pat, and then Tavia, turquoise violet. And that was the only 2 people who actually were on the scene on Bonnie Street with the red Mustang when they arrested me in 2017. But they set it up to do so. And the only other people involved were Dirty Andrea and then Jason, who was divorcing Tavia. And then I was doing drugs with Tavia. Not really a sexual thing, just we were hanging out over drugs. And he was in jail, and she didn't tell me she even had a husband until like a month into us hanging out. And then, so it got, they worked, and so they got involved. And then they set up where he's divorcing her. Okay. And then she needed a place to stay and asked me, so I allowed her to move into my home while he's divorcing her and has kicked her out of the house. That's what they set up. So it's like Donald John Trump, president. They had Dirty Dre, Jason, Tavia, and Pat. And Chris, the current hustler of it, who was like a junkie black market pirate. But it was ambiguous. He never really said anything. He just said he was a junkie. But anyway, that's the scene, and they got me locked up. And then they came back, and like my parents died, my mother died while Tavia was at my home. She died of stomach cancer. It had been going on for years. And then my dad actually committed suicide or got murdered a couple years later. So I had to move out of that house because everything's shared with me and my sister, and that house was in his name. I didn't own the deed. So I had to split with my sister. So I moved around and stuff, and I was at a condo in 2021. And, oh, by the way, I got locked up for exactly terroristic threatening and vandalism, which is Tavia's basically name. And I got a jail time and misdemeanor, which is her husband's name, Jason Martin. But anyway, so in 2021, which is exactly 4 years later from 2017, and that was mutual terrorism, so it involved terroristic threatening, like Tavia did. So they set up another scene in 2021 involving hallway stuff. And I lived at Building 8H, and they had a guy who was apartment 5E. There's two lefts into my place, like some hell scene. Who was the main agent provocateur. By the way, that condo, 264 ran by it. I had a creek out my balcony that led to a electrical plant. And then it's right by U of L's hospital. Okay, so they had like, I lived in apartment 6, so I had like Frankenstein's, like hell or something. And he did all this stuff with hallway things, rearing them at me. And then in October, they got me locked up for terroristic threatening for getting into an argument about him with him in the hallway about the stuff. And he stood outside my apartment, and when I went out there, then him and I got into an altercation, and he called the police on me. And they locked me up. In October, they came back in like 2 months later and had a warrant and arrested me for it. And I spent 45 days in jail. And it was exactly in October again. And by the way, remember, he stood out in the hallway with no shirt on. And then the stuff he had in the hallway, he put a blanket over the rail, a bicycle, a guitar, like a bike pump, all these shoes. And then they set up a rape bait there and hit me on Labor Day with that one, which was a couple months before the October warrant that they got for the altercation in the hallway. That he was raping at me, the dumb female doppelganger bitch of Labor Day. And, until they got the warrant arrested. But he was out in the hallway, and we were just like yelling at each other. He was yelling at me, I was yelling at him. He was the one standing out there. And nothing physical happened. It was just words. But I did say I'd kick his fucking ass. He's got his shirt off at me, standing out in the hallway, like, at me. So, for terroristic threatening. Oh, but I forgot. By the time, in between that time where I got arrested in 2017 October and then 2021 October, in between there, is where my mother had died, and they started hitting me with the female doppelgangers. Like their entire soulmate scam of con artists and soulmate scam. Okay, so when I got home from jail a few months after 2017 October, where I spent 100 days in there, they like all my neighbors moved, and they set up all these people at the houses after. And they set up at 221 Ben with his red-headed girlfriend, who looked like me and Tavia combined. Now, this is back on El Dorado. Okay, and there's Ben the boogeyman with her, and next door neighbor bitch. So she was the first doppelganger. And there was this weird stuff where there was a fire hydrant across the street to the right, and then aimed at my front door. And he would pull his car back, and then her car would line up in front of the fire hydrant. Okay, and that was part of the female entrapment thing. And then, so then from his place, there was my place and my next door neighbor, and then the other next door neighbor, which was 215. So that's 4 houses. Again, 4 houses, like Donald John Trump tyranny rape of their illegal gabble. Okay, and that house was connected to my backyard by an easeway that passed by the neighbor directly next door into his yard, where we both had a gate leading to that easeway, where they claimed it was to help fix electrical equipment easier for the pole technicians. But anyway, there's a fire hydrant and easeway, and that's what they were hitting on, female entrapment. And then he had another female doppelganger, and that was Ken. So there was Ben and Ken. I think they were the Kentucky. And also, Ken had kids. 2 twin boys. Boogeymen. And they were the first ones, Ben and Ken, to start doing the rape, bait, and murder business. And then the rest of the neighbors all moved in, and they were all aiming trucks at me in cars and such. And then were sabotaging my home, and then that neighborhood is real goofy. It has an A, B, C, D, E, F, G theme, where there's Alpha, Bonnie, Carrie, Derby, El Dorado, Flamingo, and Granville. But then there's this side street off of there that goes by a school and leads to the major road of that neighborhood. Now, that neighborhood also had a park with the Butyl bypass train going by it. So it was parking a train. And I lived on El Dorado for the president's stuff. But anyway, that 8th Street was called Reading, So they were doing revving harassment at me. And that's where all the revving harassment started. And till this day, they have not stopped doing revving harassment at me. Okay. But anyway, they did the female entrapment over there. It didn't do shit, and then my dad died, and I had to leave. Like, I didn't fall for their bullshit at all. But they were harassing the hell out of my house. And then using the women to hunt me, then the men would attack. Okay. And then let's see. Before... I'm going to go into part 2 because my phone doesn't hold that much information. So there will be a part 2 on this.